Morning, everybody. How's it going? Something a little out of the ordinary for this channel, but I did want to talk about it. I'm contemplating just doing all videos on here now, regardless of the subject matter. I don't know. It's a little bit of a pain to always switch over to the Astral Hex Encounter channel. So for the time, we'll be looking at doing some videos here on gaming as well as other stuff. Oh, there we go. There's the image. It's strange to me. There's a couple of, it seems like every time I use this app, the image comes out one way or the other. So sometimes I'm looking at a reversed image, which is what I'm looking at right now as I do this live stream here. So forgive me if my camera work is a little unusual as I move around the board to kind of show us stuff, to kind of talk about things. It is flipped, and I don't know how to flip it the other way. Anyway, welcome. I wanted to talk about this game, Comancheria, because it's quite literally taking up my life right now. It's completely blowing my mind, to be honest. So I just wanted to share with you the very basics. There's a lot of videos on Board Game Geek when it comes to Comancheria and playthroughs and that sort of thing, even by the designer himself, who is Joel Toppin. So there's a lot out there. So this isn't going to be this won't be a playthrough video. I just more wanted to just talk about the game and go over the basics and some of the things that I feel really, really work. At least they work for me. So the first thing with any sort of game like this that has to play a big part in it is subject matter and the amount that I'm going to be able to immerse myself in it. Any sort of indigenous people's games, I have quite an extensive wish list on Board Game Geek, and a lot of them are the ones that I've found. I've made sure that I've put on a wish list. The subject matter is fascinating to me. The historical side of it, I have never been a history buff in the least, but these type of games do help get me into that, and then I read a little bit. This one has the added bonus that in the rule book, so there's two main books. One is Rules of Play, and the other is a playbook, which we'll go through, and I'll explain why I think this is a fantastic idea momentarily. But throughout the rules itself, you do get little notes, historical notes, and then notes for people who played his first game, which was Navajo Wars, and then player notes as well too. But the historical notes are sometimes just a couple of lines and sometimes a nice paragraph to kind of give you an idea of where some of these mechanics have come from and what they're trying to represent historically, which I do love that idea. And there's some really good designer notes at the end as well too, where he kind of just talks about the process. There we go, see, somewhere there, where he talks about the process of creating this game, especially coming off of Navajo Wars, which was apparently really, really successful. I think he did, what did he say? He did about 6 different versions of this game before it kind of hit its final. It started off as just a card-driven game, and he created a play test and did a bunch of play testing with it. And while the game itself was good, he felt like it wasn't doing justice to the history, so he scrapped the entire game, built an entire new one, did that, like I said, about 6 times before finally settling on the version that we have here. So just a quick look at the board, if I can figure that out. There we go. So into Texas, Arkansas, New Mexico, that sort of area, we're dealing with 1700 to 1875, if I haven't said that before. So there's kind of a look at the different settlements and where different enemies are located, including another indigenous, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, the Ute, the UTE. And then you have all your various bits down here that you're going to be drawing from, resources and horses and that sort of thing. Some settlements for the different groups, some of your own player pieces, ravage tokens. And here, one of the things that I think really drive this game to being as amazing as it is, the enemy instruction display, we'll talk about in a little bit. Rancheria display, so you can have up to 5 different rancherias, each outfitted with their own resources. They have their own kind of medicine man and Paraibo, the Mahimiana. It's kind of that the elder is here, and then the kind of next in line is down here, the Paraibo. So because this takes you through history, there's 4 different historic periods that this game takes you through, and with each one, what I think is brilliant, you can play it obviously as a campaign, but what you can also do is on each of the cards, let's try to get that centered up there, focus, there we go. On each of the history cards themselves, it lays out on one side of the card, it lays out exactly which period you're playing. So in this instance, 1700 to 1749. Then it gives you the entire setup right on a card where everything goes, what tracks you need to be on as far as the operations track and the general record track, how many rancherias you start with, what you start with within the rancheria, what cards from the development deck start off, and then gives you a little bonus. In this case, you can get one, excuse me for one sec, player may select one level 1 culture card and place it into play for free. So the culture cards are up here, and they cover in the frame things like warfare, trade, tactics, spirituality, politics, lords of the plains, horsemanship, and diplomacy, if that's focusing. The one that I've been starting out with, I've played now, I think about 4 times, and I'm kind of set up to start my 5th playthrough. Focus, please. Sorry about that, everybody. Anyway, there we go. So horsemanship, level 1. Wow, this flipping the image is just really irritating as shit. So for the first historical period, you get to pick one of these for free. This one gives you a +1 to your battle die roll modification, which is DRM, for Comanche bands and possession of horse counter. So when you're battling, there's die roll modifiers, as there are with a lot of these games, and if you hit a certain level, I think it's if you hit 6 or higher, then that's a victory for the Comanches. Anything lower is a defeat, that sort of thing. Again, I don't want to dive too deep into each individual rule set. So suffice it to say that throughout the game, you can pick up different cards. So once you've done the setup on the card, you just flip it over, and it gives you some more details. And this is again part of the brilliance of this game. There's not a lot of digging you need to do to find out how to make things focus. There we go. Somewhere, please. Deep breaths, T. Fuller. Deep breaths. Sorry, everybody. This is so not entertaining. There we go. So the cards themselves lay out everything you need to know, including the victory check objectives. So in this particular scenario, player must control Upper Arkansas and have a rancheria in a second territory. So each of these groups, colored spaces that you see, are different territories. So this here being Upper Arkansas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. You have to have complete control over getting rid of these other settlements that are here through battle, or raids rather, or there's stuff that come up where they become allies right here. And if they become allies, you basically take that group under your wing, so to speak. So that allows you to gain control of the territory. And then all you have to do is spread out into any other territory and create one more rancheria, which again are these, everything from this track here. So this letter A right here is the one rancheria that we have so far. Now, as easy as that sounds, the thing that really puts the pressure and forces you to make some hard decisions and really honestly just be aggressive is this operations track up here. Once this operations marker starts hitting where they're numbered, there's certain, you have to do a die roll. And if you get below that number, you're forced to do a passage of time, which means that you're moving out of your one historic period into the next one. So there's a whole bunch of checks that you have to do when you're moving from one period to the next. And eventually what you do is it triggers a victory condition. So have you met the victory conditions? And if you haven't, then you've lost the game. That's it. You're starting again. So because this track ends up moving pretty fast as you're playing the game, I had some lucky die rolls. I was actually down to, I believe, 5 before I finally got a die roll that forced me to do a passage of time. So it allowed me to do a couple of things, which is, I think, partially why I won. I mean, I was playing fairly aggressively, but having a lucky roll is definitely a part of a lot of these games, right? You do get forced to do stuff at a certain time, which is also good to keep things moving, but it's a pretty fast track. So you really have to be aggressive and pushing your empire basically out into the world and starting to kind of raid and gain resources and get yourself situated for the victory conditions. And that was one of the things that I found with this. When you get to that kind of passage of time check phase, once you've kind of read through that and what kind of things, there's quite a lot of instructions in there, things you have to do before you get to that actual victory check. Once you know what those instructions are coming, you can set yourself up really nicely to be able to gain that territory that you need. Anyway, yeah, so the flow of this game is incredible. So when you're, brief talk about this enemy instruction display, you'll get prompted again to get the enemy involved. And one of the things that you do is you get a cup and you're putting in a lot of these different chips. And there's a 4 enemy AP, a 3 enemy AP, and a 2. So there's 12 of a variety of those. And then there's also 10 success chits. So you're looking to pull the success chits for sure as you're playing the game. And every time you pull an enemy AP, you're compiling them, you're stashing them here on the available enemy APs track right here. So when you're finally coming to decide who you're going to battle or who gets to do their moves, their counter moves, you're going to be spending these to put these into effect. So for example, subjugate here is worth 3 and we have 4. So if it was their turn, they would do that. So this is a solitaire game. And this is, again, I've talked about it before with a couple of other games that are solitaire driven. This is where it all can fall apart. If this kind of internal AI isn't up to snuff, the entire game ends up suffering. And thankfully for this one, that is not even close to the case. That internal AI, the enemies, it's done so incredibly well, and there's enough randomization in it that it really keeps things moving, and you guess as much as you can see what's coming up. It's, pardon me, it's never a guarantee. So when you're picking west, south, east, or north, the first thing you're doing is you're coming to your card, because in different historic periods, there's going to be different groups that you have to deal with. There we go. So in this case, we have the north, west, and the south that are enemies. First thing you do is roll a die, and if it's a 1 or 2, it's the north. 3, 4, and 5, it's the west. 6, it's the south. Once you've decided who you're going to battle, you roll a second die, and if you look along the side here, it's 1 to 6. So let's say I rolled a 3 for the group, which would put us in the west column, and then let's say that I rolled a 5. That brings us to this peace token here, and the first thing we do is flip it over. So every counter is double-sided, and they have different effects on each side. So even with that, as much as you can see what's coming, at the drop of a hat, you may roll a die and flip one of these counters over to its opposing side, which really keeps things moving. So as you're spending the APs, once you've done one, you move it over and you keep filling up this side until you have no more APs to spend. So let's say you get to that point right there, and now they have 0 APs to spend. Everything moves up the track, and then everything comes around this way and fills up underneath. So you're getting sort of a shuffle as you're going. So it's reorganizing, it's putting chits in different spots. So again, you're dealing with that. You never know which group you're going to be combating, and you never know which one is going to get flipped over. So it really keeps you guessing, and it really keeps things fresh. So it doesn't, sometimes when you've gone through, there was a couple of times I had a lot of available enemy APs when it got to that stage, and I ended up going through a column, I think twice, almost twice. So once you're kind of in that stage, you can see things happening. But for the most part, it really mixes up the game for you and keeps you guessing as to what's coming at you. So I think that works incredibly well. The other thing that I think works really well, and we'll kind of end it on this note, is the way the game is laid out. So you have your rules of play, and then you have your playbook. The first thing that you have within your playbook is a tutorial. And what it does is it walks you through step by step how to set up the game. And then it takes you through a play of the game, of this first historical phase, most of the way through it. It leaves you right at a point where they say, take over from here and just continue playing. But for the most part, it takes you through the major things you're going to come up against within the game. And when it comes to even picking chits from the cup, it tells you exactly which chits to pick, tells you which cards to buy, it tells you exactly what to do in every scenario. So incredibly helpful, because once you're kind of into the rules, there's all these boxes here that say, please pause here and read all of section 2.5 and 2.6 in the rule book before continuing. So it refers you right back to the rule book. You read those sections to get a little bit of an idea. Hey, Paulo, how are you doing? You read rules and that section to get a little idea of what exactly that territory, what exactly that rule set is, and then you dive right back into the game and just keep going on. I found that incredibly useful. That, along with a couple of videos that I watched of people playing this first historical scenario, really worked well for me. So moving on to the next part that makes this such a beautiful design is the inclusion of these two kind of cheat sheets. So now that you've played the basic tutorial, now that you've kind of read through the rule set, they give you this very detailed but short cheat sheet that you can reference. So it takes you right through the sequence of play. So the first thing you have to do is the war column phase. The second thing you have to do is the operation selection phase. Third thing is operation execution. Fourth is operation cleanup phase. So it really takes you through, and within each of them, they refer to sections. Here's the take actions, here's planning, here's the passage of time. It's more military. It's kind of both, honestly, Paulo. So military conquest for sure, but there is an element of managing your resources for sure, because when you do things like when you get some captives, or you trade for food and trade goods and eventually guns as well, on these chits here, they're worth population points. And when you get to your victory check, you can use those population points to buy more tribes, or more warriors rather, for your realm. And as your rancherias start to grow, which are kind of like your home bases, you want to fill each of those with some warriors. So that's where the kind of resource management comes into it for sure. But it's driven by military conquest. Like if you're not aggressive, you won't be able to pass the first history phase. You just won't be able to. You need to get out there, and you need to do raids, and you need to do trading, and you need to take over territories. You're not going to make it if you don't. And I think that's maybe also what really works for me, Paulo, now that you brought that up, is the fact that it is between those two. It's a bit overwhelming at first, but once you kind of get that into your head that that's what you have to do, the gameplay is really quick. And at this point now, it's a quick reference for me. This just kind of stays by my side. The rules stay by my side, but this is the one that I just use, and I can just read the little bits and remind myself of what's next, and then get in there and start playing. So once you get a handle on this, I love that this is the setup for you, that this is all you really need. And every once in a while, just referring back to the rule book, just for a bit of clarification in case something has slipped your mind. So for this enemy instruction display, again, the back page here lays it out in really, really nicely. Ally, here's the rules for ally, here's the rules for culture, here's the rules for encroaching, for hunting, for peace, for raiding, recovering from being ravaged, settlements, subjugate, and then war. Incredibly well done. Very, very impressive. There's another cheat sheet that came with the game as well that just talks about the game counter summary, just in case. And I don't think I've ever referenced this, to be honest. It's helpful to have, absolutely, but I don't think I've ever used it. And just kind of talks you through resolving enemy instructions on this side. What I found a lot more helpful was something that someone put together on Board Game Geek. They put together a Comancheria cheat sheet. So how do I get APs? Here's how you get APs. How do I acquire cards? Here's how you acquire cards. How do I get resources? Here's the ways that you can get resources. This I've used quite a bit. If I'm at a point in a game where, shit, I really need to up my military points. How the hell do I do that again? Just a quick check on here. It's in planning. Step 4 can convert culture points to military. Just gives you that little Cliff's notes. I made a couple of notes for myself, gaining horses and making sure I put a reminder that you can use trade goods to redraw success chits or reroll dice. So stuff like this, and that's where the beauty of Board Game Geek, a website like Board Game Geek, really comes into play. There's guys that are playing these games and creating sheets like this and talking about the games and creating extra information to kind of help make gameplay easier for everybody. So this has been invaluable. What else can I tell you? I'm just really, really blown away by this game. It's incredibly well done. Like I said, last night I made it through the first historical phase. I made it through the second historical phase, and then halfway through the third, I realized that I actually cheated on the second historical phase. So that's why I'm kind of starting again to really give it a fair shot. I don't know what else to say about it. Thanks very much for joining me there, Paulo, if you're still around. But when these games work, they really, really work. And really blown my mind. I expected to enjoy it. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I have been. Beautifully designed game. The game board itself is incredible, really nice and textured, heavy stock. The counters themselves, or the chits themselves, are nice and thick. Beautiful stuff, really, really beautiful stuff. I bought this used here in town for dirt cheap. Yeah, for an unbelievably good price, and it was unplayed. He had sleeved all the cards and had everything punched out, but he just never got around to playing it. And I'm really glad that I took the trip across town to pick it up, because this is really worth it. The only other thing that I didn't really talk about is the general record track. So here you have your own APs. Here's your movement points for when you send a band out, some rating and trading, etc. Culture points, military points. If your culture and military points are ever at 0, both of them, if they ever get down to 0, you've lost. If there's any extra available enemy APs, you keep track of them on here. The operations, as I was saying, operations keeps moving down until you have to do a passage of time. Every once in a while, you'll get told to put some chits on this track. Once the operations hits that particular mark, you'll be prompted to put whatever's there into the cup, which then changes things up on the game too. Yeah, beautiful stuff. I have a friend who buys games. I and a couple of other guys join him at his home to play. I think my friend would like this, although he prefers having a role-playing element. Yeah, if your friends or games are into kind of historical simulation games, I would absolutely say give this a try. The thing with this type of stuff, for me anyway, it does have a good kind of role-playing element in it, because you are really, as I was saying at the beginning of the video before you got here, Paulo, the ability for some of these games, they need to be able to suck me into their world. I need to be able to imagine myself in these scenarios. And I found it really easy with this one to really get into it. So I would say that that's sort of a role-playing element to it for sure. It's not a heavy role-playing where you have a free world to kind of explore and stuff, but there is that element in kind of the immersive side of things when it comes to RPGs. If you guys can find a copy, I would definitely recommend checking it out. Again, the designer's name is Joel Toppin, and it's from GMT Games, and I believe it was 2016. Is that what it said up there? Yeah, 2016. So still fairly new. And as I was saying, he's on games at this point. Navajo Wars now, his first game that he designed, is kind of top of my list for ones to keep my eyes out for. Anyway, that's it. If you are interested, please go to Board Game Geek, type in Comancheria, and there will be links to more videos. There's plenty of guys who have a lot more experience with games in general that you can watch their videos, and they'll walk you through it step by step. And I would highly recommend doing that. Thanks very much, everybody. And thanks for joining me, Paulo. I appreciate it. We'll talk to y'all soon.